The town square glowed with paper lanterns, the air sweet with the scent of roasted corn and summer dust. The annual harvest dance had arrived tonight when laughter ran wild, fiddles sang, and even the shyest souls found a reason to smile. But Clara May Henson stood at the farthest edge of the lights, clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders. She had come because her mother begged her to. Said it wasn't good for a young woman to spend every evening baking alone in that little brick shop. "Go on, child," her mother had said, pressing a hand to her cheek. "You bake half the pies for the town. They can spare you a dance." Clara May had smiled faintly, pretending she believed it. But now, standing here among laughter and ribbons, her heart felt heavy as the dough she needed every dawn. The other girls twirled in satin and lace, their skirts flashing like wildflowers in a breeze. They whispered behind gloved hands when Clara passed, their eyes glinting. She wasn't blind to their stares, nor deaf to the cruel giggles that followed her wherever she went. Bless her heart. "She's too heavy for the real," one of them said, just loud enough for her to hear. She crushed her partner's toes. Another snickered. Clara kept her eyes low and busied herself at the pie table, pretending to arrange the tarts she'd baked that morning. Her dress, pale blue and stitched by her own hands, strained a little at the waist. She had tried to make it pretty, had even tied a ribbon at her braid, but no ribbon could hide what people already decided about her. As the fiddler began a fast tune, couples rushed to the center of the square. Boots clapped, skirts flared, and the wooden floor came alive. Clara smiled softly despite herself. She had always loved the way people moved to music as, if the world was kind, if only for a song. But no one asked her. Not once. She waited through one tune, then another. Every time a man turned her way, she caught her breath only for him to pass her by, heading for some girl slimmer, livelier, easier to see, as beautiful. Finally, as the fiddler struck up a slower melody, Clara could bear the stillness no longer. Her feet itched to move. Her heart begged for release. So she stepped forward. Not into the circle. Not among the couples, just a little way from the lights, where shadows softened the edges of shame. She closed her eyes and began to sway. Slow at first, barely a movement, like wind in wheat. The music curled around her, soft and sad. She lifted her arms slightly, let the rhythm guide her. For a moment, the world fell away. The laughter, the whispers, the sting of being unwanted. She danced because it was the only thing that made her feel like herself. A hush fell over part of the crowd. Clara didn't see it, but a few onlookers had turned to watch her. Some nudged each other and smirked. One girl whispered, "Would you look at that, she's dancing alone?" Clara's cheeks burned. Her steps faltered, but she didn't stop. Not this time. Not when she finally felt light enough to move. And then, a shadow crossed hers. A tall figure stepped into the lantern's edge. She looked up, startled. It was Eli Turner, the quiet rancher who'd moved back to town last spring after his father passed. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't looking at her with pity either. He simply extended his hand. "Miss Clara," he said gently, his voice low and sure. "Would you do me the honor?" For a heartbeat, she froze. The world had gone still around them, the fiddler's bow trembling in midair. The crowd watching. Her heart thudded once, twice. And then, with trembling fingers, Clara May placed her hand in his. Eli's smile reached his eyes as he whispered, "Dance with me." And for the first time that night, Clara didn't care who was watching. She only knew the music and the warmth of a hand that didn't let go. The fiddle started again. This time slower, like even the musician was afraid to break the spell. Clara's pulse pounded so loud she could barely hear the music at first. Her hand rested in Eli Turner's, rough and warm, his thumb brushing the back of her knuckles with a gentleness that felt unreal. All her life, no one had asked her to dance. Not once. Eli stepped closer, his hat tilted low, his eyes steady on hers. "Don't worry about them," he murmured, his voice barely above the tune. "Just follow me." Clara swallowed hard. "They're all watching," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Then let 'em watch," he said, smiling faintly. "They might learn what real beauty looks like." Something in his tone made her chest ache, the way he said it, like a promise, not a compliment. He guided her hand to his shoulder, his other hand resting lightly at her waist. The warmth of it steadied her, chased away the sting of every cruel word she'd ever heard. The lanterns above swayed in the breeze, casting ribbons of gold over the square. Around them, people stopped dancing, whispering, some even frowning. But Eli didn't care. He moved slow and sure, leading her across the wooden boards, their steps soft as breath. Clara's heart stumbled at first. She was terrified of stepping wrong, of hearing laughter rise again. But Eli's eyes never left hers. "Just breathe," he said softly. "You're doing fine." And so she did. They turned once, twice, her skirt brushing his boots, her curls catching the lamplight. The music grew richer, the rhythm syncing with her heartbeat. For the first time in her life, she wasn't hiding behind pies or polite smiles. She was part of something beautiful. A child giggled near the front. Someone clapped softly. Then another joined. Soon, the whole square filled with a quiet, uncertain applause, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. The same girls who'd mocked her earlier stood still, their laughter gone. The one in the yellow dress bit her lip, looking down. Eli leaned closer, his voice meant for her alone. You dance like you've been waiting your whole life for this song. Tears stung her eyes. Maybe I have, she whispered back. He chuckled, low and kind. Then let's make it last. They swayed under the lanterns until the music faded into silence. When the last note hung in the air, Clara realized her hand was still in his. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, but it no longer mattered. Then, from the corner of the square, the town's fiddler old Mr. Drew called out, "Play another." The crowd erupted in cheers this time. The fiddler lifted his bow and began again, faster now, livelier. But before the next song could begin, Eli turned to the onlookers. "She's the best partner I've ever had," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the square. "You should all be thanking her for showing us what grace looks like." The crowd fell quiet again, ashamed, perhaps, or simply stunned. Clara felt her cheeks burn, but this time, it was from something close to pride. When Eli looked at her again, he smiled. Not the small, polite kind, but something deeper. "You've got more courage than half this town," he said. "Don't let anyone make you forget it." She managed a shaky laugh. "I think I might remember it now." He tipped his hat. "Good, 'cause I'd like to see that smile again maybe tomorrow. If you're free." Her heart skipped. "Tomorrow, I'll bring coffee," he said. "You bring one of those apple pies that make the whole street smell like heaven." Clara couldn't help but grin, her tears shining in the lantern light, and as the crowd slowly returned to their own dancing, Eli offered his hand once more. "Shall we finish this song, Miss Clara?" She nodded, her heart lighter than she ever remembered it being, and as the fiddles rose again, they spun beneath the stars to souls who no longer cared about whispers, only the music that had brought them. The morning after the harvest dance dawned warm and golden, sunlight spilling across the cobblestone streets of Willow Creek. The whole town smelled of apples and hay, and of course, fresh bread. Inside Henson's bakery, Clara May stood behind the counter, her hands dusted with flour, shaping loaves as she always did. But something inside her was different today. Her hands moved slower, her heart still replaying every moment from the night before the hush of the music. The warmth of Eli's hand, his words echoing softly, "Let Em watch." He had danced with her when no one else would. He had looked at her, not through her, not past her but at her, like she mattered. The tiny bell above the bakery door jingled, startling her out of her thoughts. "Morning, Clara," came the bright voice of Sally Ann, one of the town girls, thin, sharp-faced, always at the center of gossip. She leaned against the counter, pretending to admire the pastries. "Good morning, Sally," Clara said politely, dusting her hands. "Would you like your usual raisin scone and milk?" "Oh, yes, please." Sally's tone dripped with sweetness, but her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Quite the sight you made last night." Clara's stomach tightened. "Oh," Sally smirked, dancing right there in the middle of the square with Eli Turner himself. "Didn't think he'd be..." She let the sentence trail off, her meaning hanging heavy in the air. Clara forced a small smile. "Didn't think he'd what?" "Oh, you know," Sally said airily. "He's such a quiet man, hardly speaks to anyone. Guess no one figured he'd take interest in someone so unexpected." Clara pressed the scone into a paper bag, her cheeks warming. "Eli's kind," she said softly. "That's all." Sally grinned. "The kind that buys a woman pie the next morning, I hear." Clara blinked. "What do you mean?" Sally shrugged. "Oh, nothing. Just that he was seen heading this way not 10 minutes ago." As if on cue, the doorbell jingled again. Sally turned, her grin widening. And there he was, Eli Turner, hat in hand, tall as a pine, his brown eyes crinkling in a smile that seemed to warm the whole room. "Mornin', Miss Clara," he said. "Smells like heaven in here." Clara's breath caught. "Morning, Mr. Turner, you're up early," he chuckled. "Hard to sleep after a night like that." His gaze softened. "I figured I owed you that coffee I promised." Sally's eyes darted between them, practically glowing with curiosity. "Well, isn't this sweet?" she said with a laugh. "Guess I'll be on my way before the bakery fills up with romance." "Good day, Miss Sally," Eli said with polite finality, tipping his hat. The bell jingled behind her as she left. Clara sighed, shaking her head. "You didn't have to scare her off." He grinned. "Didn't scare her. She ran before I could order." She tried not to smile, but the corners of her lips betrayed her. "What'll it be then, Mr. Turner?" He leaned an elbow on the counter. "Coffee, 2 sugars, and one of whatever you think's your best. That'd be the apple pie." "Then that's what I want." She poured his coffee, her hands steady now, the nerves melting under his easy calm. They sat at a small corner table, something she'd never done with a man before. The air smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans. Eli took a sip, then looked up at her. "They'll talk, you know," he said quietly. Clara nodded, her smile faint but sure. "They always have. But for once, I don't mind." He smiled back, that slow, honest smile that reached his eyes. "Good, because I'm not about to stop giving him something worth talking about." Clara's laugh came soft and genuine, ringing like music in the warm little bakery. For the first time, she realized she didn't feel small or ashamed or invisible. She felt seen. And as the church bell rang in the distance, marking another day in Willow Creek, Clara May knew her life had shifted just a little, just enough to let the sunlight in. By the end of that week, the whole of Willow Creek was buzzing. It didn't matter that Clara May had only shared one dance and one slice of pie with Eli Turner's. Small towns had a way of stretching stories until they squeaked. At the general store, old women pretended to compare flour prices while whispering behind their hands. At the post office, men leaned on barrels and smirked, saying the quiet rancher had odd taste. Even the preacher's wife made a passing remark that some folks didn't know their place in polite society. Clara heard every word. She didn't mean to gossip, had a way of finding her, like smoke that crept under every door. She kept her head down as she swept the bakery porch, the broom scraping softly. Her mother, Mrs. Henson, sat inside near the counter, peeling apples for the next batch of pies. "Child," her mother said gently through the window, "you're wearin' that frown again. What's wrong?" Clara leaned on the broom. "They're talkin', Mama, about me, about Mr. Turner." Her mother sighed. "Let them talk. That's all some folks know how to do. You think I didn't hear the same when I married your father? They said he was too poor, too wild. But love don't listen to fools." Clara smiled weakly. "It's just no one's ever paid me attention before, and now that someone has, they act like it's a sin." Her mother looked up, her eyes soft but fierce. "Because kindness from a good man doesn't fit the picture they've made in their heads. But that don't make it any less real." The bell above the bakery door jingled. Clara turned down. There he was again, Eli Turner. Dust clung to his boots, his hat pulled low from the sun, but his grin was unmistakable. "Mornin', Miss Clara. Thought I'd stop by before heading to the ranch." Her heart fluttered. Despite everything, "You'll have the usual, if the lady's serving it," he teased lightly. Her mother chuckled from the counter. "He's got a good tongue for sweet talk. Clara, be careful now." Eli laughed. "Only talk sweet when the pie's good, ma'am, and I reckon your daughter's got the best in 3 counties. Clara blushed, ducking behind the counter to fetch the pie tin. When she turned back, Eli was looking at her not the way the townsfolk did, but as if she was something precious. "Clara," he said softly, "I know what they're saying. Heard some of it myself this morning." Her chest tightened. "Then you know why you shouldn't be seen here so often." He stepped closer, voice steady. "I know I should have done it sooner. But if the town wants to talk, maybe it's time I give them something to talk about properly." She blinked. "What do you mean?" Eli smiled, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small cloth bundle and set it on the counter. Inside lay a delicate silver hairpin, simple but beautiful, shaped like a flower. "It belonged to my ma," he said quietly. "She gave it to me before she passed. Told me to give it to someone who reminded me of her kind of strength." Clara stared at it, tears gathering. "Eli, I can't." "You can," he said, "because you stood up there that night when no one else had the heart to move. You danced when the world told you not to. That takes courage, Clara May, and that's the kind of woman I want beside me." Outside, 2 women passing by the bakery froze mid-step, staring through the window at the scene. Clara saw the man this time. She didn't flinch. She reached out, lifted the pin gently, and met Eli's gaze. "Then I'll keep it," she said softly, "and I'll keep dancing too, even if they keep watching." His grin widened. "That's my girl." For the first time, Clara laughed freely so loud. Her mother smiled from behind the counter. The 2 gossiping women outside hurried off, no doubt to spread another round of talk. But this time, the whispers didn't sting. Because for once, the story they'd tell was true. The quiet rancher had chosen the baker, with the soft hands and the brave heart, and she wasn't Sunday morning came bright and clear, the church bell tolling across the sleepy town of Willow Creek. For most, it was a day of peace and prayer. For Clara May Henson, it was a test of courage. She hadn't missed a Sunday service in years, but today felt different. The gossip had thickened like fog all week, curling around every corner she walked. The sight of Eli's mother's hairpin glinting in her braid only made it worse. Some smiled politely as she passed. Others whispered behind him books. Her mother squeezed her arm as they neared the chapel steps. "You keep your chin high, Clara. The good Lord knows the truth." "I'll try, Mama," she murmured, though her hands trembled. Inside, the little wooden church smelled of cedar and candle wax. Sunlight filtered through the windows, painting soft gold across the pews. Clara sat near the back, as she always did, hoping to blend in. But today, no one could miss her. The whispers began before the preacher even stepped up. "I heard he gave her a gift," someone hissed. "They say he's lost his senses," another murmured. "Poor man probably felt sorry for her." Each word pricked like a thorn. Clara fixed her gaze on the hymn book, reading the words she couldn't bring herself to sing. Then the door creaked open, heads turned, boots echoed against the floorboards. Eli Turner had come. He wasn't a regular churchman, usually spent Sundays tending the ranch, or visiting his father's grave, but here he was, hat in hand, striding down the aisle like a man who didn't owe anyone an apology. He paused at the pew where Clara sat, meeting her eyes with a steady look that made her pulse quicken. Then, in full view of everyone, he sat right beside her. A hush swept through the congregation. Even the preacher hesitated before clearing his throat and beginning the sermon. But Clara barely heard a word. Eli's presence beside her was louder than any hymn. When service ended, people began to file out in clusters. Some avoided looking at them. Others whispered with wide eyes. Finally, Mrs. Dillard, the town's most self-appointed lady of standards, approached, her chin high. "Mr. Turner," she said sweetly, "I do hope you know what folks are saying. A man of your reputation ought to be careful who he keeps company with." Eli smiled, calm but firm. "Ma'am, I reckon reputation's worth less than decency, and I don't see anything indecent about sitting next to the kindest soul in town." Mrs. Dillard's eyes widened. "Well, I never, maybe you should," he said lightly, tipping his hat. Clara bit her lip, trying to hide her smile. As Mrs. Dillard huffed away, Eli turned to her. "I figured you could use a friend today." "You shouldn't have had to do that," she said softly. "Now they'll talk even more." "Then let them," he said. "If truth's what they need, maybe they'll choke on it." She laughed, despite herself, shaking her head. "You really don't care what they say, do you?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Clara, when I look at you, I don't see what they see. I see the woman who bakes for widows without asking for a penny. The woman who danced even when the world laughed. If that's something to mock, then maybe this town needs more fools like me." Her eyes stung, her throat tight. "You're going to get yourself talked about worse than me." Eli smiled, offering his arm. "Then we'll be the talk of the town together." Outside, the sunlight poured over them like a blessing. They walked past the churchyard, heads turning as they went, but Clara didn't flinch this time. Her hand rested in the crook of his arm, steady and sure. At the gate, he looked down at her. "Next Sunday," he said quietly, "I'll be sitting right here again, unless, of course, you'd rather I didn't." Clara's smile was soft, but certain. "You'd better. I don't much like sitting alone anymore." He grinned, the brim of his hat dipping. Then it settled. And as the bell tolled once more behind them, its echo rolling across the golden fields, Clara May realized something simple, something strong. The world might still whisper, but her heart no longer bowed to its noise. The following afternoon, the sun hung low and honey-colored over Willow Creek when a gentle knock sounded on the bakery door. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and opened it, surprised to find Eli Turner standing there with his sleeves rolled up and a shy grin tugging at his mouth. "Afternoon, Miss Clara," he said. "I was hoping you'd close up early today. Thought maybe you'd take a ride with me." Her heart leaped, though she tried to sound calm. "A ride?" He nodded toward the wagon hitched at the end of the street. "I'd like to show you something." Clara hesitated. "You know what folks will say if they see me riding off with you." Eli's grin widened. "They'll say, I've got good taste." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible. Only stubborn," he said, offering his hand. "Now come on." Clara took it warm, steady. Calliston soon found herself beside him on the wagon bench, the horses trotting toward the hills. The wind lifted her curls, and the scent of wild sage filled the air. It felt like freedom. They rode in companionable silence for a while until the town disappeared behind them, replaced by open land and waving grass. Ahead lay Eli's ranch, a wide stretch of golden pasture, framed by a weathered barn and a modest farmhouse shaded by cottonwoods. "It's beautiful," Clara whispered as they stopped. Eli smiled faintly. "Ain't much, but it's home. Been in my family since before I could walk." He helped her down, and they walked through the barnyard, chickens clucking and a lazy dog thumping his tail nearby. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay and horses. Sunlight spilled through the cracks, dust floating like tiny sparks. Eli leaned against a post, watching her take it all in. "You know," he said quietly, "this place used to be full of noise. My folks, the hands, the laughter. Then one by one, it went quiet." Clara turned to him gently. "You lost them." He nodded, eyes shadowed. "My PA first, then my mom. The fever took her last spring. I buried her out behind the cottonwoods." Clara's heart softened. "I'm so sorry, Eli." He shrugged, his voice rough. "I thought after that, I'd just keep to myself. Work the land, stay busy. But I reckon the silence got too heavy. That's why I came to town that night. Didn't plan to dance. Didn't plan to talk. But then," he looked at her, his gaze holding hers. "Then I saw you." Clara blinked. "Me?" He nodded slowly. "You were standing there, trying to look invisible, but your eyes, you were watching the floor like you were fighting tears. And then you started to move, just a little, like you were dancing with ghosts. And I thought, if she's brave enough to dance alone, maybe I can be brave enough to join her." Her breath caught. No one had ever seen her like that, not truly, not deeply. She looked down, her voice trembling. "You make it sound like I did something special. I just couldn't stand still anymore." He stepped closer, the light from the window painting him gold. "You did more than dance, Clara. You reminded me what life's supposed to feel like." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air hummed with quiet truth. Then he smiled softly. "There's something else I want to show you." He led her out behind the barn, toward a small fenced garden. Wildflowers had begun to bloom, there some planted, some grown from seed, carried by the wind. In the middle stood a simple stone marker. "My ma loved flowers," he said. "I planted these for her. Every spring, She used to bake pies and sell 'em in town. Folks said she had a heart big enough to feed the whole county. When I first tasted yours, Clara," his voice faltered, eyes glistening, "it reminded me of home." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "Eli," she whispered, "I don't know what to say." He reached for her hand again. "Then don't say anything. Just promise you'll keep dancing, 'cause I'd like to keep watching." She smiled through her tears, squeezing his hand. "Only if you'll dance with me next time." Eli chuckled softly. "It's a deal." And under the quiet sweep of the cottonwoods, with the setting sun turning the sky to rose and gold, they stood side by side to hearts that had once known loneliness, now finding peace in the same soft. 2 weeks later, the town of Willow Creek gathered for its annual spring picnic by the riverbank. The air was alive with laughter, fiddles, and the smell of roasted corn. Women spread checkered cloths beneath the oaks, and children ran barefoot through the grass. For Clara, the thought of going turned her stomach into knots. Crowds meant stares, whispering, snickers behind fans. She had told Eli she'd rather stay home, but he only smiled and said, then they'd miss the best pie in town and the prettiest woman to bring it. So there she was, clutching her basket of apple cinnamon pies, her blue dress freshly ironed, curls pinned back with a single pink ribbon. Her heart pounded as she stepped from the wagon beside Eli. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Clara felt the old shame creep up the weight of every cruel laugh she'd ever endured. But before she could retreat, Eli's arm slipped around her waist. His touch was warm, grounding. He said loudly enough for all to hear, "Afternoon, folks. You all know Miss Clara Baker, best baker and kindest soul in Willow Creek." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Cartwright's eyes narrowed. My, Eli Turner, you do know how to flatter." Eli grinned, tipping his hat. "Ain't flattery if it's true, ma'am." Clara tried to hide her blush, but Eli's steady presence beside her made it hard to feel small. He didn't shrink from her, didn't lower his voice. He was proud, openly gently, firmly proud of her. They spread their blanket near the water, and before long, curious neighbors drifted close drawn, perhaps, by Eli's easy laughter or the scent of Clara's pies. "Did you make these yourself?" asked Mrs. Whitmore, her tone cautious but not unkind. "Yes, ma'am," Clara said softly, "with cinnamon from Mr. Jenkins's store." One bite was all it took. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes widened. "Mercy, this is heavenly." Soon, others came in tipping hats, women smiling shyly, even children tugging their mother's sleeves for a piece of the pretty lady's pie. For the first time in years, people looked at Clara not with ridicule, but with appreciation. Eli sat back, watching her laugh with a little boy who'd smeared pie on his chin. His eyes softened. He'd seen her kindness, her quiet strength, and now the rest of Willow Creek was seeing it too. Then came Beatrice Cartwright, all lace and pride. She sauntered over with her parasol twirling. "Clara," she said smoothly, "I must say, you've changed. I almost didn't recognize you." Clara stiffened, unsure if it was a compliment or a dagger. Eli stood, his tone calm but firm. "That's because you never looked close enough. Beatrice, beauty's always been there. Some folks just need clearer eyes." A few men chuckled under their breath. Beatrice's smile faltered. She muttered something and walked away, her parasol snapping shut. Clara's gaze met Eli's, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in her eyes. "You didn't have to say that." He smiled softly. "Yeah, I did." As the afternoon wore on, the fiddlers struck up a tune, the Willow Waltz. Couples gathered near the clearing, dancing beneath the flutter of lanterns hung in the trees. Eli turned to her, his expression gentle but serious. "You promised me a dance, remember?" Her breath caught. "Here, in front of everyone." He extended his hand, eyes warm. "Ain't no better place than where the world can see how lucky I am." Her fingers trembled, but she placed her hand in his. The music swelled, and they began to move slow at first, then easy, as laughter bubbled up between them. The whispers faded into nothing. The crowd that once mocked her now watched in silence, not with scorn, but something softer. Maybe shame, maybe both. Eli spun her gently, the ribbons in her hair catching the light. When she stumbled, he steadied her with a smile. "See," he whispered, "told you you were made to dance." And this time, Clara didn't dance alone. The next morning, Clara woke with sunlight streaming through her window and the faint scent of wildflowers still clinging to her hair. She had barely slept. Her mind replayed the dance by the river again and again. Every turn, every laugh, every time Eli's hand had steadied her. For the first time in years, she felt light. By mid-morning, she was back at her bakery, humming softly as she kneaded dough. The bell above the door jingled now and then, as customers came in more than she'd ever had before. Word of her pies had spread from the picnic like wildfire. But even sweeter than the clinking of coins was the warmth in people's voices. "Good morning, Miss Clara. Save a slice for my husband, won't you? My little girl says you're her favorite baker." Each kind word chipped away a bit more of the wall she'd built around her heart. She caught herself smiling at her reflection in the glass. The woman she saw wasn't invisible anymore. That afternoon, as she carried a tray of fresh bread to the front counter, she heard the door creak open. Eli's voice filled the small shop. "Smells better than heaven in here." She looked up, grinning. "If you're fishing for free samples, Mr. Turner, you're getting mighty predictable." "Can't help it," he said, leaning on the counter. "Your baking's got me spoiled." Before she could reply, the door jingled again. 2 women entered, Mrs. Cartwright and her friend, with sharp eyes and sharper tongues. Their voices dropped to a hush when they saw Eli beside Clara, but not quiet enough. "Can you believe it?" one whispered. "He's actually courting her. I heard she's set her sights on him," the other said, snickering. "Poor man doesn't know what he's getting into." The words sliced through the air like knives. Clara froze, her chest tightening. The warmth she'd felt only moments ago drained from her, replaced by the old familiar, cruel and heavy. Eli didn't seem to hear. He was asking about the pies cooling by the window, but Clara's hands trembled as she tied the box, her smile forced and brittle. When the women left, she mumbled something about needing to fetch more flour and escaped to the back room. There, away from the world, she sank onto a stool, pressing her palms to her face. It shouldn't matter. She'd told herself that so many times, but the words echoed anyway, louder than laughter, sharper than truth. Too big, too plain, too much. A soft knock came at the door. "Clara." She wiped her eyes quickly. "Yes?" Eli stepped in, his expression gentle but searching. "You okay? You went quiet, all of a sudden." She tried to smile. "Just tired. Long morning." He studied her face. "That's not it." Her throat tightened. "Eli, maybe you shouldn't keep coming here so much. Folks are starting to talk. Let 'em talk." She looked away. "You don't understand. I've spent my whole life being their joke. I don't want to drag you into that." Eli crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. "You think I care what they say? Clara, I've been judged my whole life too. For not having money, for running a lonely ranch, for not fitting what folks expect. But I learned something: people talk to fill their emptiness. You don't owe them your joy." Her eyes welled again. "It's just hard to unhear it." He knelt beside her, taking her flour-dusted hands in his. "Then let me talk louder." She blinked at him. "What?" He smiled softly. "You bake like heaven. You laugh like sunlight. And you've got the kindest heart in Willow Creek. I don't care if they whisper till the cows come home. You're the one I see." Her lips trembled. "You shouldn't have to defend me." "I don't mind," he said quietly, "because loving you isn't a burden, it's a blessing." For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The hurt, the noise, the fear, it all faded under the weight of those words. Clara exhaled shakily, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You always know what to say." He brushed it away with his thumb. "That's 'cause I mean it." And there, in the little bakery that once held nothing but silence, Clara finally let herself believe. The following weeks rolled by like a dream. Every morning, the scent of warm bread and cinnamon filled Willow Creek's main street, and customers lined up outside Clara's bakery before dawn. The same people who once whispered behind her back now greeted her with bright smiles and kind words. Children waved from windows. Men tipped their hats. Women asked for her recipes, claiming their husbands swore no one baked quite like Miss Clara Turner. The name made her blush every time. Turner. She wasn't his yet, but somehow, the town had already decided otherwise. Eli came by, often sometimes with a basket of wildflowers. Sometimes just to help her close up shop. He never made grand gestures, but every small act, the way he wiped the counters beside her, the way he made her laugh until flour dusted her cheeks, felt like a promise. One morning, he arrived with a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Close early today," he said. "Again," she teased, folding her apron. "You'll have me running out of pies." "Maybe," he grinned, "but I've got something better for you to make." "What's that?" He tipped his hat. "A memory." They rode out to his ranch just as the sun began to dip, turning the sky golden rose. The cottonwood trees swayed softly, scattering white fluff that floated like snow. Eli hopped down from the wagon and offered her his hand. "Come on," he said. "Got a surprise." He led her past the barn and down a narrow path toward the river. When they reached the clearing, Clara gasped. The place looked almost magically. Lanterns hung from branches, glowing softly in the dusk. A table stood nearby, set with 2 plates, a pitcher of lemonade, and a pie her own recipe, perfectly baked. "You did all this?" she asked, breathless. Eli rubbed the back of his neck. "Did my best. Might have burned the first one." She laughed, and the sound made his eyes soften. They ate in the quiet hum of crickets, talking about small things, how the hens had started laying again, how the town's children had painted the fences for the spring fair. Every time she looked up, he was already watching her, as if memorizing every expression. When the plates were cleared, he stood, brushing off his hat. "You know, Clara, when I was younger, I used to think I'd never have a home worth sharing. Thought I was meant to be alone with the land." She tilted her head. "And now," he smiled faintly, "now I know I was just waiting for the right person to come along. Someone who could fill the quiet without saying a word." Her chest tightened. Eli, he took a deep breath and reached into his coat pocket. When his hand came out, it held a small wooden box. Clara froze. He opened it to reveal a simple silver ring, nothing fancy. just a smooth band that caught the lantern light. My ma's, he said softly. She wore it till the day she passed. Said I should give it to someone who makes life feel whole again. Her eyes shimmered. Eli, he stepped closer, voiced low and steady. Clara Baker, you've brought laughter back to this land, peace back to my heart, and sweetness to every morning I wake up. I know you've been hurt, and I can't promise folks won't talk again, but I can promise you'll never face them alone. Tears blurred her vision. You mean that? He smiled gently. Darlin', I've never meant anything more. Her hands trembled as she covered her mouth. The night felt alive around them, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of trees, the whisper of the river. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes. Eli slipped the ring onto her finger, his touch careful, reverent. Then he cupped her face and kissed her softly, slow. Sure, like a man who'd finally come home. When they pulled apart, she laughed through her tears. I don't think I've ever danced without music before. He grinned, taking her hands. Then let's fix that. Under the cottonwoods, with lanterns swaying and moonlight spilling like silver, he drew her close. They moved in quiet rhythm, no band, no crowd, just two hearts keeping time. And this time, when she danced, she didn't hear laughter or whispers, only the sound of love, steady, gentle, and true. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and golden, sunlight spilling over the rooftops of Willow Creek like a blessing. Outside the little white chapel on the hill, ribbons fluttered in the breeze. The scent of lilacs and wild sage filled the air. The whole town had come, some curious, some joyful, some perhaps still whispering, but everyone was there. Clara stood inside the small back room, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the lace sleeves of her gown. It wasn't new or extravagant, just a simple cream dress she had sewn herself, with soft embroidery along the hem. But when she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. Her cheeks were warm with life, her eyes bright with peace. For the first time, she didn't see the woman they used to mock. She saw herself whole, worthy, loved. Miss Clara, came a familiar voice. It was Mrs. Whitmore, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. These are from the children. Said you're their favorite baker and wanted you to have something pretty. Clara smiled through the sudden lump in her throat. Thank you. Please tell them I'll bake something special next week. Mrs. Whitmore winked. Town's already talking about how lucky Mr. Turner is. Don't let him forget it. When the door opened again, the music began to drift, in soft, fiddle, and piano, echoing through the chapel. It was time. Clara took a deep breath, clutching her bouquet. The doors opened wide, and the sunlight poured in. The crowd fell silent. She stepped forward slowly. Every step a small act of courage. Faces blurred at the edges of her vision, but one face was clear. Standing tall at the altar in his dark vest, hat in hand, his smile steady and full of quiet awe. He looked at her, as though the whole world had stopped turning. When she reached him, he took her hand without hesitation. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, grounding her. You're the most beautiful sight I've ever seen, he whispered. She laughed softly, tears glistening in her eyes. You always did need spectacles. The preacher smiled kindly, clearing his throat. Shall we begin? The ceremony was simple, heartfelt. When the preacher spoke of love being patient and kind, Clara thought of every moment Eli had waited for her to trust herself again. When he spoke of not boasting or envying, she thought of the way he'd defended her without pride or pity. When the vows came, Eli's voice was deep and sure. I promise to stand by you through every season, whether the wheat grows tall or the storms come hard. You're my peace, Clara, my home. Her own words trembled but never broke. You saw me when no one else did. You made me believe that love isn't earned, it's given. And I'll spend the rest of my life giving it back to you. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Even the women who had once gossiped lowered their eyes, ashamed or moved, perhaps both. When the preacher said, "You may kiss the bride," Eli leaned in slowly, reverently, and kissed her with all the tenderness of a man who knew how much pain love had to heal. Applause rose around them, gentle at first, then full and bright. Later that evening, under the same cottonwood trees where he'd proposed, the townsfolk gathered for the wedding feast. Laughter filled the air, lanterns glowed, and the children twirled through the grass. When the music started the willow waltz again, Eli turned to her, grinning. Reckon it's time we finished that dance we started. She smiled, slipping her hand into his. I thought you'd never ask. And as they danced, Clara didn't think about her size or the past or the whispers. She thought about the journey, the girl who had once danced alone in the dark, and the man who'd stepped forward, held out his hand, and said, "Dance with me." The crowd watched as they moved in easy rhythm beneath the stars, the music mingling with the soft rustle of the cottonwoods. And when the song ended, Eli bent close and whispered, "You know, Mrs. Turner, I think I'll be asking you to dance for the rest of my life." She laughed through her tears, resting her head against his chest. "Then I reckon I'll keep saying yes." Under the warm light of lanterns and moon, they swayed together long after the music faded to souls who had once been lonely, now finding forever in the rhythm of love. And from that night on, Clara Baker Turner never danced alone.